Welcome back to the garage. Today we finally get that T90 transmission rebuilt and I get a few other odds and ends done. I'm also talking to you from the future because I forgot to film an intro to this video. Been keeping busy lately. It's been pretty hectic, honestly. It's tornado season in Arkansas, so been dodging tornadoes. Had a lot of rain, a lot of hail, interesting times. But I did get a few things done, and the big thing, of course, was getting the transmission finished. Got a couple of leftover questions, but those can wait for now. So let's jump into it. Since we've just had 3 days of really crazy weather, figured I'd get out in the garage and do something with the Jeep at least. I think this bell housing underneath all this dirt and gunk is actually blue, so we're gonna find out. So the short answer is yes. The entire thing was blue, which I believe indicates it was a factory rebuild. Unfortunately, the paint is really not in good shape, and the more I scrape at it, the more ends up in the bottom of the bucket. So, drat. I guess that means I have to go use my favorite tool and sandblast it. Unfortunately, before I can do that, I have to clean this thoroughly. And what's on here is a layer of what appears to be baked on clay. I mean, this is almost flower pot levels of clay. And it just doesn't want to come off easy. And when you get it loosened up and try to wipe it off, all you end up doing is coating the entire thing in clay. This could take a while. Here is yet another example of all of the boring, time-consuming, nitty-gritty kind of work that someone has to do a mild restoration on one of these old flat fender Jeeps. Media blasting can be oddly satisfying, though it is loud and somewhat time-consuming. It also helps if you have a compressor that'll output enough CFMs to do this in a timely manner. My setup is somewhat limited, but it will eventually work. Even though the work is slow and tedious, the end result is pretty satisfying, I will admit. So one of the reasons I bought this thing was just in case I wanted to attempt to blast a wheel up to 16 inches in size. This is the spare off the Jeep. Sure enough, it fits, though the glass really doesn't like that it fits. Probably got about 15% of the inside of the wheel cleaned up. That's all I'm gonna do to start with. Leave the patina on the outside and leave the inside surface nice and smooth and able to hold a bead. Well, here's the last new protective sheet that came with the thing from Harbor Freight. I can actually see in the cabin again. It's wonderful. Wonder how long this will last. And that, I think, is about as good as it's gonna get for the spare rim. That's not even the right style rim for this Jeep. I think this one's off a truck. Bell housing still looks like crap. That little cover is okay. And I'm leaving those two dents right where they are. Character marks. And finally, at long last, we get to reassemble the transmission, hopefully for the last time. Though at this point, we are pretty darned proficient in loading up needle bearings. And of course, this time we also have all the things we need to put the transmission together. Had a little bit of an accident with the pilot needle bearings, but got around it, loaded them up correctly this time. Main gear in, cluster gear in, shaft tapped in. Had a little bit of trouble with that locking plate, seeing as though we bent it just a little bit on the failed attempt, so it took a little bit of persuasion to go in correctly. But this time we were successful. With all of the major assembly behind us, all that's left to do is seal the case as best we can. The T90 transmission is not exactly known for being leak-proof. And because we chose to use a non-sealed front bearing like original and a felt seal, that might bite us in the rear end later on. But that'll be a lesson learned. We went ahead and soaked the felt seal in oil to prevent a dry start, and all we can do is hope that former gasket seals up well enough to not leak. I did have to pause here for a second and check Rick Stiver's guide to find out how many foot-pounds to torque these 3 screws down on the front bearing retainer. 9 foot-pounds, if you're wondering. And with that, that's just about it. Okay. It's not torqued, but it is tight. So in theory, that should be in reverse. First, and here we have it. Wish that was a real celebratory frothy beverage. It's in a root beer. Here we have a T90 rebuilt, done. Dad and I have never rebuilt a transmission before, and as far as learning goes, the T90A1 here is probably the easiest thing to learn on. So I'm glad we got that done. We made a few mistakes along the way, and maybe we did some certain things that are not quite the best way for modern rebuilds, but we've learned a lot of lessons, and I think that was what matters most, is just the learning. So it's about 98-99% done. Still gotta put this gasket in, and that's about it really. We do want to test and make sure that it lines up right with that gap on second gear, because if it's not right, it'll randomly just drop out of second gear for no reason. So that's about it. Got this thing safety wired to make sure it's not going to just drop all the stuff out the back. So yeah, that was a heck of a learning experience for me and Dad. Wow, remember this thing? Yeah, that was a while ago when this was back when I was an optimist. And I thought, yeah, we'll just get her all back together and be ready to drive it by fall. No. So this is outdated. I stopped following it a while because things just kind of went sideways as soon as we found out the transmission was kind of toasty. But I guess I can kind of mark off the T90 trans assessment. Add rebuild, knock that out. Unfortunately, nothing else really changes other than I need to add rebuild the transfer case. But that's up next. It's over there. I've chiseled a bunch of the baked on clay and mud and stuff off of it. Pressure washed it 3 times and it's still not clean. It will spend time in my sandblasting cabinet. So I think that's it for this one. Got a few little miscellaneous things done, and the big one, transmission is done. Thanks for bearing with me. I know it's been kind of a crazy trip these past few months, waiting for parts and then failing a lot, but thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one.